Talking with Jerry.
Don't forget to subscribe. It's Black History Month, week 3, and this is episode 5. Two Black history facts that you probably don't know, and I can almost guarantee you that in detail they weren't discussed when you were in school, even if you took a college class possibly on this subject. So, the facts that I want to mention tonight both deal with things that helped the United States become what is the United States, and what I would say was a betrayal amongst people who helped make really significant historical facts happen here in the United States, and unfortunately, it didn't end well for them in the end. So the first one has to do with the War of 1812, and Andrew Jackson, who later went on to become president. He was a slave owner himself. He's responsible for the Trail of Tears, taking the many Native American tribes, the Cherokee, the Seminoles, and others out to the western part of the United States and the Midwestern part of the United States as well, where many of them perished. But in 1815, the United States was in a war. It was the War of 1812, where the United States had declared war on the British, and Andrew Jackson needed soldiers, and he went and conscripted, which means they were forcing you, so to speak, or you were gathering up soldiers to fight on your side against the British. And Andrew Jackson put together a force to have a major battle, which was the Battle of New Orleans. And out of the about 7,500 men perhaps that he had, 500 of them were free black men and many African slaves. And as I said, the slaves, of course, were conscripted, meaning basically they were kind of forced. They really didn't have any say. And Andrew Jackson went to this plantation, and he promised slaves that they would get wages, they would get food, they would get respect as well as the white man. And in quote now, he told them, if you go and at the battle fought in victory on Israel's side, you shall be free. Now, in Israel's side, they talked in all types of metaphors at that time in history and didn't speak a certain type of proper English. But what he meant by that statement was, if you come and fight with us and we defeat the British, you will be free. This is what these slaves were told. Now, one of these slaves was named Robert. And Robert, as I said, was forced. He went and fought alongside Andrew Jackson and these 7,000 plus men in a few battles, besides the major battle of New Orleans against the British. And also fighting alongside the black slaves and black freemen were Choctaw Indians. And they were promised the same thing. Even though this was the Indians' land, they were being discriminated against by the white and many of the French settlers who were there. So the Indians were also promised that they would be treated fairly like white men after a victory, and that there would be things that they would be given to make them feel a part of now the United States as it's beginning to grow as a country. Well, they had a few battles, and Robert was severely injured in one of the battles. Many of the slaves and the black free men who fought against the British, because they were improperly trained, were killed, and as I said, many were injured. The U.S., of course, wins the Battle of New Orleans. The war is kind of like a draw, and at the end, uh, Andrew Jackson goes and tells the slaves that they're not going to get their freedom. Well, these conscriptive slaves, as you can imagine, were very upset. And Robert gets a gun and he goes to shoot Andrew Jackson. I mean, he's like close up on him within a couple of feet. But I guess you could say, fortunately for Andrew Jackson, the gun was not loaded. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lived to be president and do many of the other things that he went on to do. So Robert was sent back to a life of slavery on the plantation that he came from, and there was no freedom for him or any of those other slaves at that time period. So it's a historical fact. I would say it's another blemish on America. Things that, of course, in today's world, people don't even want you to know. So here's the second Black history fact. We all know, we were taught in school about the great Lewis and Clark and their expedition that was funded to go west of the Mississippi to see how big the United States was, because nobody really knew what was west of the Mississippi, which is like halfway in the middle of the United States. And, you know, how big was this land called California? How big was the West really? You know, because this was like frontier land. There was no states out there. They didn't know, you know, how many Native American tribes there were. They had to draw maps, and you know, this was a major undertaking. So this expedition was put together. It was called the Corps, C-O-R-P-S, of Discovery. And Lewis and Clark were the people heading this up, the two frontiersmen. And Clark had a slave that he had inherited, as with many other slaves, from his father who died. And this slave went with Clark on this expedition. Now, you know, he was forced to go. His name was York. And on many occasions on this expedition, walking all the way across the country, west of the Mississippi, to California, and then north, and then all the way back, he saved the members of the expedition and Clark on a few occasions, helping them with the Native American tribes, soothing things out, because the tribes that they encountered had never seen a black man before. But he was able to rudimentarily communicate with them, and they found him being indifferent to white men. And he perhaps, on numerous occasions when they ran into Native American tribes, perhaps saved them from being slaughtered. When they fell ill, he took care of them. He discovered a lot of new plants. And remember, they were animals that they had never seen before, that Americans had never seen. Grizzly bears and all other types of animals that were out in the Western Plains that they came across for the very first time. So when this expedition ends and they come back and they report how big the United States, which at this time isn't the United States, but all this land that's west of the Mississippi that is going to eventually become the United States is, the men of this, Corps of Discovery, this expedition force, I mean, the United States treated them royally. They were given land grants, they were given money, they got prestige. I mean, it was, you know, wonderful for them. But you wonder, what about Clark's slave, York? Well, York goes to Clark and he says, look, you know, I understand, you know, I probably can't get all this land that each one of you guys are getting, or money. I only want one thing, and that's my freedom. I think I earned it. And Clark was not having it. He turned down York's request for his freedom. And York had asked him, you know, he had a wife that lived on a faraway plantation, you know, really like in another state, who was owned by Clark's brother. And he said, if you let me go there, I can work, I can even then I'll pay you some money. He tried everything as a way of negotiations so he could be a free man, after everything he did to help explore this country, and was turned down by Clark, and many other things happened to him in his life, and he died being a slave. So Those are two just short stories that are historical facts about things in detail that you probably weren't taught in your history class, or unless even in some documentaries, they just either don't touch on either one of these facts or they don't go into specific details. And they're really sad stories, but further evidence and proof about the role that African Americans made doing things that helped this country become what it is today. Had it not been for these two men, and of course, when we mention Robert and the slaves who fought in the Battle of New Orleans, it wasn't just him. There were several hundred, but they changed the fate of history. So I'll have two more unknown, perhaps to you, Black history facts that you can learn about later this week. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get the alerts. And next week is the last week of Black History Month. I'm going to end it with some facts about Africa, the African continent, that I'm sure in detail when you watch that episode, you're going to be shocked at the things you'll learn.